moving on. Israel is fighting a multi-front war, a war against Hamas in Gaza, against Hezbollah in the north, and a war of public opinion playing out in the international media. And so joining us today with more on the media front and the international coverage of Israel and the war is the Executive Director of Honest-Reporting, Gill Hoffman. Gill, always great to have you on our show.
Pleasure being with you, Lidar.
So we're over 5 months into the war. How is the global media covering Israel and Gaza today?
It gets worse every day, Lidar. You know, as we get away from October 7th, it gets forgotten by the world, those terrible atrocities. Whereas among Israelis, it's as if it happened yesterday, because we live in a society that constantly focuses on this terrible tragedy. And we all know people who were either killed or have family members who were killed or kidnapped. For us, it doesn't go away, and for the world, it does, and for the world media, even more so. So even the obviously necessary background paragraph that says why this war began is too often left out nowadays.
And is there still interest on the part of the media, you know, as we saw in the initial days and weeks after October 7th? Still interest in Israel in the war?
There's always an obsession with Israel around the world. We are local news in any country, in any state, whether we like it or not. And so even though there are other conflicts going on around the world, there was something in one of the papers today about how Sudan has been forgotten. We wish at times that we could be forgotten, and we never will be. There are those who say the news is kind of plateaued because nothing is new right now. And because of that, perhaps there's a lack of interest. But the media outlets don't seem to be hearing that from their audiences because they're not stopping.
And now international media coverage on Israel has been biased, to say the least, since the start of the war and even before. And there have been many negative reports on Israel, and in numerous instances when digging deeper, you've found that Hamas supporters are actually behind these reports in the mainstream media. I mean, how is this possible, and what is being done to combat this?
Hamas has had a strategy of using the media to advance its message and its cause to the world. This was proven by Ilana Dayan, the top investigative journalist in Israel, on her show Uvda, which is a top-rated primetime news magazine here. She revealed a Hamas document that meticulously planned infiltration into Israel, that Israel already had possession of in the spring of 2022, so it should have been prepared for this, but they obviously were not. And one of the things that this document said was that they would take advantage of the media. And so yes, there were journalists who were friends with Hamas people who infiltrated into Israel that day, who knew that they were part of the plan, and there were plenty of journalists who didn't realize they were part of the plan but supported it, who infiltrated into Israel or who have really aided and abetted Hamas. And then there was a decision, Lidar, that is very controversial in retrospect, of the Israeli government to not allow journalists to enter Gaza freely from Israel. It was intended to save lives of journalists, but because they're not, it's resulted in the only people reporting from Gaza being Gazans with cell phones or who were recruited as freelancers for major news organizations and who have the obvious bias that they're Gazans, they're Palestinian patriots well before they are journalists.
I see, and I'm also curious about how the media is covering the hostages. I mean, is this something that's being discussed, reported on? Is there awareness of the fact that 134 people are being held by a terror group?
As much as the family members of the hostages have tried to remain relevant by going to various international forums, they have been forgotten. You know, I feel so terrible for Rachel Goldberg and their family, with Hirsch still there in captivity. She has spoken so beautifully around the world, and you know, Hirsch used to sit right in back of me in synagogue, when he was a little boy. They deserve better, but unfortunately, yes, they are being forgotten. But at least the world paid attention to them for a while. The evacuees from the north, nobody even knows about them.
Very unfortunate. And so what is Israel doing to combat this lack of information? I mean, what can Israel do to get this information and get the truth out there?
So not just the state of Israel, but the organization that was founded to help the hostages and the mayors of the various communities where people have been evacuated from both the south and the north in Israel. They need to be using social media to highlight their plight. Need to be getting more and more messages out there. You know, today's International New York Times have a profile of Palestinians, ordinary Palestinians killed in Gaza, about children, about religious figures, about grandparents, humanizing them. For their side, that's a very big accomplishment. We've had our share of accomplishments too, but too few and far between, and we need to have them again because the hostages have been forgotten and the evacuees were never on the radar of the world.
All right, Gill Hoffman, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.